during the waiting room.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call to order the Tuesday, March 9th Finance Committee meeting for the town of Nantucket. And let's go through the script. We are now using Zoom webinar for meetings, which allows for public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for the meeting. People registering to be an attendee must use their names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode. They can click the raise hand button if they wish to speak. I will call on those who have raised hands in the order they were raised. YouTube chat will no longer be enabled, and all questions should be directed through the chair. As a preliminary matter, this is Denise Cronow, Chair of the Nantucket Finance Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative, and it will be in the order in which I see you. Peter McEachern.
Here.
Thank you. Peter Schaefer.
Here.
Chris Glowacki.
Here.
Jill Veith.
Here.
Stephen Morey.
Here.
George Harrington.
Here.
Thank you. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Brian Turbot.
In attendance.
Thank you. Leslie Snell.
Here.
Thank you. Terry Norton.
Here.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to page 2. Good evening. This open meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment as noted. Let's see. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. And I am now turning to the first item on the agenda. And just before I do so, let me cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I get that wrong every time. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will ask the Finance Committee if they have any comments and questions. Please hold until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. And if members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call. And one other thing, everyone who's on needs to be on with a full name, first and last name. So if you're not, please change that. And with that, I will ask for an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
So moved. Oh,
And the
second.
Thank you. By roll call, Peter McEachern,
Aye.
Peter Schaefer,
Aye.
Chris Glowacki,
Aye.
Joe Grouse,
Aye.
George Harrington,
Aye.
Jill Veith,
Aye.
Stephen Morey, and Denise Cronow, aye. Okay. I now open the meeting for public comment for any public comment not related to Articles 70 and 71, both bylaw amendments for noise, 72, bylaw amendment Council for Human Services, 73, bylaw amendment animals, 74, Select Board for Airport Commission Bylaw Amendment, Rental Car Bylaw Amendment, Airport Town. 82, Bylaw Amendment, Chapter 127, Streets and Sidewalks, Road Construction. And 96, Charter Amendment, Section 2.5C, Town Meeting Warrant. I do not, are there any hands raised? No hands raised. I will close the public comment. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight, because Tom has, because there's an airport commission meeting starting at 5 o'clock, we will go ahead and start with Article 74, and then we will go back and do the other articles in order. So, Tom, I think the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for taking it early. I'm not sure if I'm the appropriate person to address this. It may be better for town council, given the history here. The airport made some recommendations, and then the select board did not adopt those. Our council made some recommendations, they were not adopted, and then our commission made some recommendations, and they have not been adopted. So the current status of the proposed warrant article is much less to do with airport right now. Our concern going into this was, or my concern was, that we made sure we had a fair and equal and open playing field when we put out the request for proposal, and town council has indicated that there's not an issue with that. So the latest version that you're, I believe, seeing for the warrant article is something that town council worked with our council on. And again, our commission made some recommendations. The last two things they recommended was that there be a floor on the number of vehicles, and that there be a date by which the regulations would, would be created. And select board has not agreed to that. So that's where we stand today. Again, I just have a concern, but town council is, I guess, ruled on that. And I'm not an attorney. I just was concerned from a, we're being encouraged to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it just appeared to me that because a group of operators was in business 25 years ago, they had a certain opportunity, and they now control a government asset in a government building, essentially. And I just, if town council has already said that it's okay the way it's written, so we can put out the RFP, and that's what we're going to proceed with. But I do want to clarify a couple of things. One, this was not generated based on any revenue or revenue need or revenue projection at the airport. We didn't have any look at revenue on this. The other was, initially, we were considering a fourth operator, but in speaking with one of the current operators, who made a very valid point that they're getting clobbered with COVID, and we said, that's off the table. So we're not looking for a fourth operator. Again, the agreements expired at the end of last year, and we were in the process a few months back of looking at the RFP. When the situation came up, we had to extend it. So current status is the current operators have an agreement through the end of this calendar year, and we'll be preparing an RFP late this summer, early fall.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Greg, I think that throws the baton over to you.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. I'm a little bit taken aback by Tom's comments, since it was my understanding that this was an airport initiated article, and in fact that the select board would have been just as happy to do nothing with the existing bylaw. But my understanding was that the airport was anxious to make changes to the medallion system, and in particular, the concern that was expressed to us was that under the current system, there is a maximum number of medallions that can be issued, and a medallion essentially is equal to one rental car, and right now that the ceiling for that is 700 cars or medallions, and all of those medallions are spoken for, and they don't expire, and they can essentially be held by the existing operators in perpetuity. So the airport made a proposal to try to change the bylaw to eliminate the medallion system so that they would have more flexibility in attracting new operators to the island, and to give them better ability to dole out the number of existing licenses that might be available. And once I got involved, and Amy Baxter and I worked on this, and it really seemed clear that this is a complicated topic, and it's not as simple as raising the cap or eliminating the cap, or requiring that medallions expire at a certain time. There were a number of moving parts, and we didn't feel that this was something that we could put into a format for a bylaw on this town meeting warrant. And the original proposal from the town was to table this until next year, which raised additional concerns from the airport. And so we tried to reach a compromise with them. And the compromise that we reached is what you see in front of you now. And basically what it does is it allows the select board to enact regulations to determine how rental vehicles are going to be distributed on the island. So rather than having a specific cap in the bylaw or a specific procedure in the bylaw, those issues would be dealt with through a regulation enacted by the Board of Selectmen, or I'm sorry, the Select Board. And we put provisions in there that the Select Board would first conduct a public hearing with notice. And the thinking was that by doing that, we would have more time to look at this issue and address it in the proper way, but that we wouldn't have to wait all the way until next year's annual town meeting in order to bring another bylaw back to the town. So what you see in front of you is we've proposed adding 2 new sections to the bylaw, sections B1 and B2. In section B1 is what I just spoke about, that the select board will have the authority to enact regulations to establish the maximum number of vehicles, procedures for allocating rental vehicle medallions, and the establishment of certain fees. The second part of this, section B2, says that if and when the Board of Selectmen enacts those regulations, then section B, which is the cap on medallions, would go away, as would section D, as in David, which deals with the procedure for transferring those medallions. So essentially what happens here is that the Board of Selectmen have the option to enact these regulations. Once they do, those regulations will replace certain existing provisions in the bylaw.
Thank you, Greg. Finance Committee, please raise your hands if you have questions. I will start with Joe Grouse. You are first off the mark.
My first question is, what problem is this trying to solve? I'm based on both what Greg and Tom just said, as well as the letters that I think all of us have received from some of the rental car operators, I'm mystified as to what isn't working well and why either the airport initiated and or the select board wants to change this medallion system. I'm kind of perplexed as to where the fundamental problem is. I don't know who wants to take that one.
I'll take it if Greg and Chair are okay with that.
Please, Tom.
Okay. Joe, what we did when we were developing the RFP, we were looking at all the potential opportunities or what scenarios may occur. And we had at least 2 other companies that are not on island today express interest in the business. And that's where, in looking into this, they would have to either purchase a medallion from an existing operator or not be able to operate. So if they were to give us, let's say, a proposal that was better in service and quality and whatever else, the other criteria may be, we we'd be in a catch-22 position to award it to them because they would also have to have the medallions. So we're kind of forced to right now. I don't know if we're forced to give it to the folks that have medallions, because they could in fact sell them to someone else if they so choose. But let's assume for argument's sake that a new entrant came in that had a better proposal, we want to select them. The current operators could take those medallions, move somewhere else, and not leave any medallions for an operator here at the airport.
Okay, so
Oh, sorry, Joe, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Denise. So you can go on to the next person. I'll take my turn.
No, I was just going to follow up on Tom's question, which is to say, so did you just say that, say, for example, an on-island rental car company could leave the island and take their medallions with them, like taking their football and going home?
I don't know about leaving the island, but they could certainly leave the airport and go downtown or to another, business operation and move their operation there and still have their medallions. That's my understanding. And I don't know, Greg would correct me if I'm wrong here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Greg, you-
through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the bylaw does not address what would happen if a current medallion holder were to leave and not voluntarily turn them in. And I think that is one of the problems that we're seeking to address here, is this issue of once you have a medallion, it's yours forever. And my understanding is that, there may be one or more operators who, who have more medallions than they have cars, but it's in their best interest to continue holding on to those medallions so that they can keep others out.
Oh,
But but if they had business, I'm sorry.
go ahead, Joe. I was going to say I interrupted you before, so finish your questions, please.
Okay, but it strikes me as if I'm one of the 5 operators, I think it's 5, leaving aside Hertz, and I've got excess medallions. I mean, if there was a business opportunity for me to rent more cars, wouldn't I use them? I mean, I understand wanting to hold on to an asset that has a perpetual life, but I guess it doesn't strike me that there's, that people, I don't know, maybe are people beating down the door at the airport to compete with the 5 existing users?
Tom, that question would be for you in terms of
Well,
competition at the airport, please.
as I said, we have received 2 additional companies expressed interest in the process and want to be notified when the RFPs are put out. So if we have the current 3 and 2 more, a total of 5 that put in, let's assume, we have to rank them according to the selection criteria that's developed. And it kind of puts us in a bind that and again, I'm just going to use a crazy example. What if a small company comes in or somebody else and says, I'm going to give 50% discounts to all island residents? And again, this is a very far, example, but that might weigh high on the criteria, but yet they're unable to obtain medallions and they can't operate. So puts us in a catch-22 type position.
Okay, thank you. Joe, one follow-on question that
Yeah,
I
one
need.
follow-up question.
Peter.
Okay, this is my last question to these. So these medallions that were created in 96 and 98 are in effect perpetual, or at least they appear to be perpetual, but a bylaw amendment at town meeting can in effect evaporate them? Is it that's sort of an authority the town meeting has, that even though these grants were given by whoever at the town 20 odd years ago, a town meeting vote can in effect say, well, that deal's off, these medallions go poof?
That's a question for Greg Corbo, please.
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. That's correct. Town meeting established this system, and town meeting has the authority to change it. And courts have found that, if you are in a regulated industry, you cannot reasonably expect that the rules are never going to change. So in my opinion, yes, town meeting does have the authority to change the way that medallions are allocated.
However,
Thank you.
just to be clear, not on this article, because that would be a change of scope in the article and not allowed at this town meeting. So it would have to be a different town meeting. If they were to say something, if somebody was to make an amendment on the floor that said, I would like it amended that all medallions expire at the end of the year and are up for auction, say. That could not happen at this town meeting with the way that this is written.
Well, that's correct. However, this is written so that it would give the select board the authority to do that through the regulations that they enact.
Correct, but this, a citizen could not change what I just said, what I just phrased. A citizen could not make that change. It would only be, this article only gives the select board the ability to make changes provided that this article passes. And then the
That's correct.
select board can make the changes that they want to make.
That's correct. They can make the changes by regulation. And yeah, obviously if a motion to amend is made, that's the call of the moderator to decide whether it's within scope. But I think something in the nature of what you described would likely be considered beyond the scope of this article.
Yeah, it's too hard to say unless Sarah was here. So, and unless we had a specific proposal. Thank you. Chris Glowacki.
No, I think my questions were covered. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Schaefer.
You have a couple. First off, I always thought the difference between a license and a medallion was for life. That's the way it works on taxi cabs. So, I mean, just calling it a medallion, it seemed to me, you're saying it's going on forever. But that's an aside, and I'm not 100% positive on that, but I have no other reason to think that why you would name it a medallion to begin with, or somebody named it a medallion. Let me ask a better question. Are either of you unhappy with the current service?
No, I'm not. I mean, but it's a process we have to go through legally.
I'm not sure I understand why you have to go through it legally.
We have to go through a public offering, essentially, a request for proposals, and open it up to the public. We're only allowed to have a certain term, and I believe it's 5 years. And Brian Turbot may know more about this too, but we then have to develop a request for proposals, put it out as an offering to the public, and identify the selection criteria by which we would select the proposals.
So
like our restaurant business or any other business we do here.
When the medallions were handed out, the people the operators that got medallions, were they told that it's only for 5 years?
Peter, I'll jump in here for a minute. And
Yeah.
in hindsight, would have invited Amy Baxter, who knows all on this topic. However, the medallions are actually issued by the town, so that they're the licensing authority for the medallions. What Tom is referring to is he's doing an RFP for people who want to run an agency that's based at the airport and has parking spots at the airport and desk space in the airport. So
No, I understand that, but it also creates competition for the people that are already there. And when you look at the fact that because of air taxi business being down, et cetera, and COVID, whatever, I'm just interested in whether you're unhappy with the 4 or 5 that are operating out of the airport now.
No, if we were, we would have a different discussion, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
Just to your point about traffic, just so everyone's aware too, we received something this week identifying Nantucket Airport as the second fastest growing airport in the country coming back after COVID. So it's going to be a busy summer.
that's excellent news. Okay, Jill, please.
Why is Hertz able to have why were they able to have a presence on Nantucket? They're a national chain, they're huge.
I don't know the answer.
Is that because is that maybe because you're a municipal building and you're exempt from like every other rule that everyone else lives under?
I don't know. That's the way it was when I got there.
So when you send out an RFP, Avis can come in, or Enterprise, or whoever, any of these national companies can apply along with our local businesses. I'm just understanding the process, Tom. This is not a judgment.
No, that's a good call. And I was wondering the same as I was looking through some of this too. I don't know the answer to that. Based on, the other bylaws in the town, I don't know.
It just seems really odd that we can have such a huge national chain here. That's pretty unusual, except for Stop and Shop that I can think of.
In Cumberland Farms. I guess
Yeah.
they're not national.
Ralph Lauren.
Thank you, Peter.
There's no rule about not having chains on Nantucket, to my knowledge, just having locations in the core district.
Just the core? I thought you can't have something more than like 8. You can't own more than 8 businesses or something.
No.
Okay, we're not actually debating that one now. So I'm going, Joanna?
Is there an accounting of the 700 medallions? Right, like how many are to each service provider, and are they attributed to a car? Right, so that you can know who's not using the number of medallions that are unused, right?
Madam Chair, I could try to answer that somewhat.
Yes, please, Tom, go ahead.
There is an accounting, my understanding, and again, that's through Amy's office, as to exactly, how many are used, or, are they all put on cars? I don't know the process, whether the town does that or they're given to the operators to do. I don't know the details there, but they do have an accounting, I know, of who is issued how many medallions.
Greg, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. My understanding of how it works is that each of the existing agencies has a certain number of medallions available to them. So let's say you're an agency and you have 50 medallions. That is 50 cars that you are allowed to license in a particular year. So then each year you have to come in and apply for a license, and you have to specify each of the cars that you are licensing that year. I don't know what the method is, either it's license plate or VIN number. And let's say that year you only want to license 40 cars. Well, that's fine. You can license 40 cars. And then that just means that you have 10 medallions that are sitting on the side, not being used. In the next year, you can come in and license all 50. Maybe in the year after that, you license 35. But so the medallions themselves are not attributable to a particular car. But once you come in for your annual license, then you have to pay a license fee for each car that you register that year.
And in watching Mr. Young, who's nodding yes to everything that Greg said, thank you, Harvey. We now know the process. Thank you. Joanna, do you have further questions?
Well, it seems like we should be able to access this information, right, pertinent to what we're discussing, that if there, because it's hard to say if there's a shortage or if there's a non-competitive arrangement if we don't know if the number of licenses for the 700 medallions are all being used in any given year.
We do know that, Joanna, and there's a little over 600 that are actively in use, and there's about 90 that are sitting to the side.
Okay.
Yep.
And I do believe that Amy has that information available to
Have
her.
it as well. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions from Finance Committee? Otherwise, I will open it to public comment on this topic. Okay, thank you, Finance Committee. I'm opening public comment. So does anyone want to raise their hand who is on the call, who's on the discussion today? And you click the little raise hand button on the bottom of the screen. Under reactions, you get a chance to do raise hand.
I don't have a raise hand button.
Okay, Ray, I think you want to speak, so I will turn the floor over to you. So Ray Conlon, please.
Okay, in the late 90s, the medallions were issued based on the number historically used in the preceding years. I was awarded a certain number of medallions, and I have used every medallion in every year since then, as I believe the other independent companies have also. It's only the largest national company that does not use all its medallions. In that particular company, is the only one that doesn't pay all of their excise taxes directly to the town of Nantucket. They pay $100 a year for a non-Nantucket registered car to operate or get the medallion. Now, we pay the excise taxes, we pay the town fees. It averages around $400 plus per car. So the incentive for the town would be to have the majority of the, or at least all, ideally, all the cars registered in Nantucket and what specifically for Nantucket. The problem becomes with this article is it will cripple us financially. When we borrow money to refleet the fleet each year, to purchase the new vehicles each year, which we replace 2/3 of the fleet each year, we need to borrow millions of dollars. And every year I sit across the desk from my banker and he looks at me and says, has anything materially changed? And every year for the last 35 years, because I've been with the same bank, the names have changed, but the participants have remained the same. And I've looked them in the eye and said, there's been no material change. If I can't say that to him, I'm going to get a lot more scrutiny and possibly be denied credit. That's really not right. I've played by the rules. I've done a good job. We have a huge following, and we use medallions, every single one of them every year, with the exception of 2020. 2020, the COVID-19 year, that's a different story. Does anybody, I know the answers to a lot of previous questions. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Sorry, there's the UPS is here and my dogs don't like UPS. So,
Mine are locked in the other room.
yeah. Jill, go ahead, please.
Ray, why don't you just tell us what you think, what is the problem that the airport seems to have? You're an operator there. I think you have an opinion on this.
Well, the last conversation I had with Mr. Rafter was in November, and he said, we really appreciate you being there open year round. We appreciate the job you do. And then I opened the newspaper and see that this is coming down the line. And then I watched the Airport Commission meeting saying that they're going to change the ownership of the medallions back to the town, which would devastate us financially. It's going to make us, the credit is going to become impossible. So it's a two-edged sword. It's going to benefit or not hurt the large national operator, and it's going to devastate me as a local operator. It doesn't make sense. This whole thing just doesn't make sense.
Thank you, Ray. Any further questions for Ray? I have.
Yes, yeah, I do. I just want to know, can you explain for you, Ray, why does this affect your medallions? Like you go up for RFP and you get that again and you'll get your medallions again, won't you?
Well, the fact that your company's net worth is based on your assets, and we count the medallions as an asset, and the bank looks at us as a financially secure place to place their money. If I don't have a surety of having those medallions, if I have that ownership taken away, or perpetual right, perpetuity, whatever, then I lose the ability to guarantee the money, and I lose the ability to service the clientele, which we've built up in the last 51 years on Nantucket. Our first summer was 1970. And it's been a family-owned business ever since, and my family hopes to continue it long after I'm no longer renting cars. But this will not allow that to happen as written.
Okay, thank you. It's crystal clear to me now. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jill. Tim Mahoney, you probably won't appreciate me calling on you, but you did send us quite a lengthy letter. And I would appreciate for maybe everyone who doesn't click and read on the packet, if you wouldn't mind summarizing those points and adding to the discussion. And if you come on and say no, thank you, then fair enough, I'll respect that. But was hoping you might want to add to the discussion that we're having.
Hi, Madam Chair. I wasn't prepared. I don't have my letter in front of me. I was kind of just listening along. I was a little surprised to see that we're a car rental company downtown, and this would effectively change our kind of situation as well. In that, I don't understand the goal, but I think everyone covered it pretty well. It's unfortunate, and I don't know what the problem at the airport is, but it's things that Harvey and I are going to be wrapped into it.
Thank you, Tim. Harvey can probably predict I'm about to do the same to him. So Harvey, if you wouldn't mind adding to our information that we have so far, please.
Yes, thank you. Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
So my main question is for section B1, to give the select board authorization to enact regulations to effectuate the bylaw. I assume that means they don't currently have the power to effectuate the bylaw now? And if not, who does?
So Greg, I will turn that over to you, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, well, really right now, all of the requirements for, obtaining a car rental license and or a medallion are set forth in the text of the bylaw. And I guess it's the licensing department that currently processes those applications. And so what the change would be is that instead of having the definitions of medallions and licenses and how many of each can be given, instead of having those things in the bylaw, they would be in the regulations enacted by the selectmen.
And also too, to follow on to Harvey's question, Greg, and right now to change the SPA law, it has to be done at town meeting by the voters. And in the future, changes to it would then be coming from the regulations established by the select board. Is that correct?
That's correct. So for example, right now, the limit on number of medallions is 700. So if this bylaw were to pass, the Board of Selectmen could enact a regulation that increases that to 1,000. But then 5 years from now, the Board of Selectmen can enact another regulation that puts it back at 700 or puts it at 500. So it sort of takes it out of the hands of town meeting and puts it in the hands of the select board.
Thank you. Harvey?
So just to follow up on that question, it sounds like, I appreciate and respect the select board. When I read through this, it looks like they could have a meeting, give a notice for a couple of weeks, properly printed in the newspaper, and then change this bylaw into regulations or whatnot. Versus right now, if someone wants to change the number of rental cars to more cars or less cars, it needs to get vetted through the process that leads to town meeting, which I think works well.
Thank you, Harvey. Finance Committee, any comments, questions? Harvey, Joe, please.
Okay, so the way I'm hearing this is the intent here, either by the airport, the select board, or both, or by the town in general, is to make it more flexible, make it easier for the select board to, by regulation, change the terms of this arrangement, strip any of these operators of their medallions at no compensation, and put in place a process by which they could all obviously apply to continue to service the rental car market here. But ultimately, the town would have a process where by regulation, instead of by town meeting bylaw, they can change the deal. So being a little snarky, I guess, Greg, but that's what it sounds like to me.
Well, that's correct. And, bear in mind that I'm not the one who is, establishing the policy here. I'm just, carrying out what was expressed to me. And, Melissa, I see, is on the line. I don't know if she can hear what we're saying, but, the understanding that was conveyed to me was that if this was not done at this town meeting, then it could not be done until next annual town meeting, which would mean essentially 2 summers worth of time before this change could be made. And it was expressed to me that the airport had a need to do it sooner than that. And so the compromise we came up with was to do this regulation process so that something could happen at this town meeting, and then the selectmen can carry it forward to the goal line without having to essentially waste another 2 summers. So, that was sort of the compromise, I think, between what the select board had originally wanted, which was to do nothing, and what the airport wanted, which was to do something right away. But again, I leave the policy judgments to others. And, I just came up with a way to carry out what the goal was as it was explained to me.
Thank you, Greg. Joe, go ahead.
A question for Tom Rafter. Tom, under the current arrangements with the, I guess, 3 operators that have kiosks or whatever you call it at the airport, apart from this medallion issue, and I assume that the rental agreements you have with them and whatever fees you charge these operators is outside of this whole issue of assigning medallions. In other words, you wanted to double people's rent, or when their lease is up, you could change their rent, you could change the terms of whatever it is they do. That sort of business arrangement is still open to negotiation between the operators and the airport. Is that a correct assumption?
I would say we have a very good business arrangement with them. They do a very good business. We're very satisfied with them. And yeah, I mean, we've done it, and we've worked with them on some of these things before. We're not, to the best of my knowledge, unless I'm directed by our commission, we're not looking to change any business terms, if you will, of going forward.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Joe. Any
Yeah,
follow-up?
thanks.
No? Okay.
No.
So a couple observations so what I see here is, as I spent a lot of time thinking about this and looking into it, and I believe that the select board has nothing but good intent. There's no question. And that they would do the right thing for the island and the businesses on the island. There's no question that they're trying to make these changes in order to not do the right thing. Saying that, I have personal concerns in respect of we are about to change fundamentally somebody's financial assets that they currently have and rely on to finance their businesses, and potentially putting them at risk. So whilst the select board can happily, and I believe honestly, say, no, we won't do that, that's not our intention. The truth of the matter is, to the bankers of the world, or the people you're going to for financing, if this was to pass under full disclosure, you would have to disclose to your bank that this now, it could potentially, you could be losing your medallions at some point in the future that you've had up until now. I also look at the medallion as Peter Schaefer does, which is it's a for life thing that you've purchased or have assigned to you, and you would need to be compensated for it if it was to go away. So that could be a misconception on my part. However I look at it, that's how I look at it. So when I couple the two things together and understanding that the select board has nothing but good intent, I still believe, and this particular article came in a hurry, and it was not something that there was a lot of runway on before it went to select board, because I watched the select board first and second discussion on it. So I'm aware of some of the feedback that was given around this article. And I agree with Matt Fee's comment, which is the select board can work on this topic without needing an article authorizing them to work on it as the policymaking organization of Nantucket. So having said all those things, those are kind of my top of mind, not even my top of mind. I've been thinking about it a lot. So I would actually go to Greg to have him reflect on what I just said and see if I'm missing the mark on anything I've just opined on. Please, Greg.
Yes, and so, I'm not here to advocate. I'm only here to explain the legal ramifications for what you may or may not do. I do think that I do agree with you that this came to the select board in a hurry. And I think that was the primary reason why we were not ready to bring a more robust proposal for changes to the bylaw to town meeting this year, because it was a matter that does have significant ramifications, and was something that those on the town side felt required further study. And so, I will say again, as I said several times, what we tried to do was come up with a compromise between the select board's interest in having more time to study the issue and come up with a more detailed solution versus the airport's desire to not have to wait another 2 years for that solution to be implemented. So, again, from the legal perspective, that's why we wrote it the way that we did. But, I will certainly defer to you as to whether from a policy perspective, that is the best way to go for the residents and businesses of Nantucket.
I guess I'll go back to my point, which was you can work on this without having to change the existing bylaw. And next town meeting, which is only a year away, you can then put in a different bylaw to change what needs to be changed after the heavy lifting has been done. But to put local businesses' financial future in an uncertain position because of the openness of this, that's, again, I'm not trying to mandate this as chairperson. Needless to say, this is Denise Cronow's opinion of looking at this topic. And so that's where I landed on this. Finance oh, go
Madam
ahead.
Chair, if I could just say one more point of clarification. The reason why I say 2 years is because the Attorney General's review period is 90 days. So if a bylaw were to pass at town meeting, say in May or June, it's not going to be in effect for that particular summer. So the way I believe the airport was looking at it was that you wouldn't have a new bylaw in place this summer. And if you didn't take any action, you wouldn't have a bylaw in place next summer either.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that's just a point of
That was
clarification.
helpful. No, that's helpful. Thank you, Greg. Okay.
Should we go ahead and make a motion, Denise?
Is everyone on Finance Committee ready to make a motion? I see one nodding head. Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. Jill, do you have a motion to make?
Yeah, I'd like.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Stephen? Or
Just
Joe?
directing you to Joe. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna, so that, if you don't mind,
You just
Madam
pointed
Chair,
to Peter Hala and his name wasn't up. His hand wasn't up, so. Okay, Joe.
I just want to say, I agree with almost everything you said, Denise. And if I were, emperor, I sort of wish this article could be withdrawn. I think it needs more time in the preparation process. All due respect to the hard work that I'm sure everybody on both sides did on this. But I just, I think I would almost rather this not be voted on at town meeting, but anyway, let's go ahead to a vote.
Okay, hold on a second, folks. I need to close the public comment section before we go to a motion. So I'm closing the public comment. Okay, now please, someone have a motion?
So can I make a motion not to adopt Article 74?
Second,
Do I have a second? Okay.
second,
Is there any further discussion on the motion? I see a shaking of noes, so I'll start with take roll call vote. Peter McEachern,
Aye.
Peter Schaefer. You're muted, Peter Schaefer.
Aye.
Thank you. Stephen Morey,
Aye.
Jill Veith. You're muted too, Jill.
I'm not.
Oh,
Aye. I think I just, sorry.
you were whispering it. Okay.
All right.
We all have Zoom
I'm
fatigue.
scared of my dogs barking in the background.
Joe Grouse,
Aye.
Chris Glowacki,
Aye.
George Harrington,
Aye.
Joanna Roche,
Aye.
Denise Crono, aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And now on to Article 70, noise. Leslie, you are up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. That was excellent summary, and I think we all obviously agree with that. And the unanimous vote is really telling. Thank you to our local businesses.
Thank you, Jill. Okay, Leslie. Gary, I saw that you raised your hand, but we're not in a public comment section of the program at this point, and as soon as we are, I will call on you. So Leslie, please, the noise, the select board noise bylaw, would you please run us through that and what the intention is?
Sure. I mean, I don't know how much detail you want, so I'll give you a little background and a summary, and if you want more information, I am happy to provide that. So back in, I believe, October, the Advisory Committee for Non-Voting Taxpayers sent a letter to the Select Board with some suggestions about changes to the noise bylaw. And there also, I think, had been an increase in noise bylaw complaints over recent years. So the town manager decided that it was time to take a look at that bylaw. She asked me to put together a work group of people from some different industries. We had a representative from the Advisory of Non-Voting Taxpayers, Advisory Committee, excuse me, someone from the Builders Association. We had a landscaper. We had someone who owns a local business and also works for the Chamber of Commerce. And we had a representative from the Civic League. So originally we were just looking at hours, particularly related to construction. That bylaw, if you all aren't that familiar with it, was originally adopted in the late 1960s. It's been modified over the years, but it's never had any significant editing or a comprehensive review. So I expanded the scope of this work group a little bit to do a cleanup of that article. There were some rather complicated noise bylaws, or excuse me, noise tables in the bylaw that referenced standards from the 1970s. And aside from the fact that they were entirely dated and also contained zoning districts that don't exist anymore, they did not contain zoning districts that have been added. We found that they were just not useful either to, property owners or residents trying to interpret them for their own use or to complain about others, or for the enforcement personnel that had to go and investigate complaints. So what you'll see in the changes is a very comprehensive cleanup. We chose to take an approach to delete the existing bylaw and replace it with all new language, only because the standard strikeout method was messy and overly confusing. Libby did ask me to point out that she plans to include a lot of information about this in the voter's guide to make it clearer to people exactly what the changes are. And there are some substantive changes, but I would say overall, a lot of it is just reorganization, making it easier to read and therefore easier to enforce. There were changes that were requested to construction noise, and the work group talked about this a lot and decided that we could really get behind changing noise for construction and landscaping in the core areas, because those are the areas where the development is most dense. It's where most of our tourism activities are focused, and that's where our primary businesses are during the summer season to support tourism. So the language in the current version is slightly unclear, and if this article moves forward, does need a minor adjustment to make it completely clear that the core that's identified in the article does include the downtown Old Historic District and the Sconset Old Historic District. So there's a map reference, and the map that's referenced does show both of those, but the language doesn't convey that as well as it could. So that would need a little changing. So in those areas, we proposed that construction noise be limited between the hours of 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. So no construction will be able to take place then. Right now, I believe it's 8 p.m. and 7:30 a.m. So that's a significant reduction during the summer. That would also apply to landscaping. And we also added a provision that handheld garden tools that are gas-powered engines have to be phased out by July 1st, 2025. So you may recall in past years, there have been discussions about leaf blowers and hedge trimmers and other things. And so we thought this might be a good time to address that as well and give people ample opportunity to plan ahead. There's also a change about HVAC equipment, which the non-voting taxpayers had requested. That language is all new. And I know the Jacques Zemicki article also had some suggestions about that. And I think that we can make some adjustments in this article to address his concern based on some emails that I saw, but I haven't personally communicated with him. So that would need to be confirmed. So the other changes came from town council. There were some legal issues identified with the older language that needed to be addressed if we were going to do an update. So if people have specific questions, I'm happy to respond to those.
Thank you, Leslie. Finance Committee questions? Jill, I'll start with, here we go. Jill, Joe, and then Peter Schaefer. So you know that I saw you. Jill?
Hey, Leslie, does the landscape community know about the getting rid of gas-powered leaf blowers and other smaller gardening tools, I guess? And what all does that apply to? I'm having a little shell shock from last year because we had a lot of people, as you remember, came out strongly against a citizens warrant that was outlined, just the leaf blowers. Is this just applying to a certain district as well, or is this island wide? Those are my two main questions. Oh, and 3, is there a buyback program?
So the first question is the change in hours for landscaping noise only applies to the core old historic districts in downtown and Wisconsin.
Okay.
So that's the noise change. The phase out, I'm just trying to find it, sorry, in this draft. Just give me 1 second. Oh, okay. So the phase out for July 1st, 2025, that applies to handheld lawn and garden tools with gas-powered engines. And that's island-wide. We did have a landscaping industry representative on the group. So I did not personally reach out to the landscaping industry on this. So I'm not aware of how, widespread this information, has made it through the community, but I have not heard any questions or complaints about it. And I know that, the noise bylaw has been on some of the Facebook pages and other things. So I'm not sure, I guess, on that one.
Well, what I remembered about that is that there were some larger properties outside of the historic district that the solar powered batteries, the electric batteries, whatever people were using that weren't gas powered, they weren't strong enough for some of the work they were doing, is what I remember as being one of the pushbacks. So it sounded like it was fine in town, but I just remember this person talking about that.
And just on that, that's the last sentence of that paragraph. So if the finance committee, wants to move forward, but wants to strike that, that's an easy deletion to make. And it may be something that, removes some controversy.
Okay, thank you. And also, is there a buyback program?
That is not included in this article, no.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jill. I forgot who I said was next. Let's go with Joe.
Leslie, hi, Leslie. On the HVAC equipment and penalties, is there any grandfathering of equipment here, or it's simply if you violate the noise rule, it's $300 a day?
So I'm going to pass that question to Charlie Gibson. He wrote that section, and Greg Corbo. They're more familiar with that section than I am.
Charlie,
But
would you like to
the
go first, please?
current standards for equipment are far below those numbers. So any working equipment, no matter how old it is, if it's properly functioning, won't be near those decibel limits. It doesn't matter on the age. If the refrigerant limitations have basically phased out all old equipment, from the old Freon to the 410 to the R22 refrigerants. So they're mostly all refrigeration compressors are all new and are far below that limit.
So Charlie, 55 decibels is that the same as the current bylaw, or is that higher than?
Well, the current bylaw has a table. I believe the lowest in there is 45, which is very quiet. But just because it's 10 decibels higher, the sound scale is exponential. It's not linear. So it's quite a big difference between 45 and 55. So 55 is like someone having a very loud screaming conversation.
Thanks.
Anything else, Joe? No?
Nope, I'm good.
Peter Schaefer, you're up.
Yeah, the thing about the lawn and garden tools, the gas powered engines, I really think we went through that once, we voted it down, and I think it's very kind of like second-handed or underhanded, better word, to stick it in here with one sentence. I just think it's kind of rude. The second thing is, who's going to enforce this? Who's going to walk around with a meter and measure the sound?
Charlie, Leslie, do you want to answer that? And
So right now it's enforced by the police, so it would remain enforced by the police.
Okay, Charlie, you feel the police can handle that?
Well, we do it right now. I'm not talking about lawn tools, but we get 10 or 12 complaints a year for pool pumps and air compressors and fan units. And even though the sound tables aren't easily workable, we manage to use them to mediate disputes between neighbors or commercial establishments. And so we've managed so far. I don't see that this is going to make a big difference with the number of complaints, but we'll see.
Thank you.
thank you. Chris, please.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, the gas-powered leaf blower, that's still on this year's warrant, isn't it? Wasn't that a called article for the canceled ATM?
Yes, so it was pushed over to this year, so it was a carry forward. And then at our meeting on March, was it 2nd or 1st? I can't remember which day now. I don't have it right in front of me. That was one of the articles I read out, and no one called it to reopen it. And our motion was motion not to adopt.
Correct. So we had a negative motion, but it hasn't been voted yet on it, ATM. And then I guess that piece of this is really jumping out at me as well. Does anyone know, is a chainsaw considered a gas-powered, handheld, gas-powered lawn and garden tool? I see Peter nodding, yes. So I'm just not aware that there are actually commercial alternatives to the needed larger chainsaws that are gas-powered currently. Maybe there will be in 4 years.
It's a handsaw.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, an axe. Yeah, okay, I hadn't thought of that. And then just, I don't know, I mean, to me, 5 p.m. seems like a pretty early end of the workday on Nantucket for the people who work. Maybe not the people who are planning their cocktail parties. So that struck me as a little early.
It just, I mean, a point of clarification to, and Leslie, please jump in and correct me. It's 5 p.m. in the Old Historic District and the Sconset Historic District, Chris, not over the whole island.
No, I get it, but those lawns have to get mowed too.
Okay, Leslie, did you want to add?
Yeah, just, I did do a little research on how much of the island that includes. And again, we had a contractor and we had a landscape representative as part of this work group. So the non-voting taxpayers had requested that we include zoning districts up to half an acre. And that would have taken up just a little under 25% of the properties, or 25% of the island area, excuse me. And the area that we ultimately included is about 2%. So it's a very small, isolated area.
Thank you, Leslie.
But in terms of dwellings, I mean, that's, you know, it's denser. That's why, you know, that by definition means we have more dwellings there. Do we have any idea how many properties we're talking about?
No, but I could find that out if it makes a difference, but not right now, for another meeting.
Okay, is there any other questions from Finance Committee before I open it for public comment on this?
Yeah, I have another one about what's the distribution of complaints? I mean, geographically speaking, where do people make most of their noise complaints? Is it from properties in town, or is it specific troublesome properties? I guess there's only, Charlie, what did you say, a dozen or so complaints a year?
Yeah, they're all over. I mean, we get complaints from as far out as Squam back to Hummock Pond Estates to Broad Street. I mean, I've been all over the island, so they're not really isolated by district. They're more of tolerance level of the people who are there and what they expect from their, you know, weekly or monthly rentals.
Got it. And in your opinion or your experience, is it getting worse? Are more people complaining because there's more bad actors, or people are more intolerant, or for any reason at all? Are there more complaints now than there were 5 years ago?
No, absolutely. And I think the problem is there's more home rentals now than used to be. We had more of guest houses and hotels downtown. So now that we see more of the seasonal rentals and weekly rentals of houses outside of town, and people who come out for a week or 2 weeks and then they find that there's a house under construction next door to them, you know, if they were there all summer long, they probably would tolerate it, but they're there for a week and they don't want to hear an air compressor, or they don't want to hear a pool pump. So that's I think is driving most of it, and that's certainly not going to go away. That's going to get worse.
Right. So it's actually the renters that are doing the complaining. We heard recently that it was the renters making the noise people were complaining about, but maybe that's backward.
No, I would say it's the, you know, more of the renters making the complaints, and it's understandable that they want to have their, you know, 1 week vacation on Nantucket, and all of a sudden there's a house under construction next to them, or a whining air compressor in their backyard.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. Every afternoon is more precious if you only have 7 of them. So thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll open it up for public comments. So I will open it now for public comment on Article 70. And does anyone want to raise their hand? Lynn Filipski. Did I butcher your name? I'm sorry, Lynn. You're muted, Lynn.
Yeah, you had it and then you undid it.
There, am I good? Good. I represent the Sconset Civic Association, and this has been a huge discussion for many years. Now that I'm president, instead of calling Charlie, they call me when they're annoyed with noise in the historic district and other districts. And I would say after we have done a village-wide questionnaire, this is one of our top concerns. So we are very for this article, especially for the old historic district, because last year we had 3 construction projects going on side by side on Broadway, and they did not stop at 7:30. This would be a huge improvement in the quality of life. As you all know from being out in Sconset, these houses are very close. I could pass sugar to you in the next house. So there were complaints from people who were renters, who are longtime Sconset village people, who just couldn't abide that kind of noise. So we are very for this, especially to curtail it from 8 to 5. This is not an unusual time period. I'm living in Florida right now. Construction here can only go from 8 to 5 from November to May. I don't see any slowing down of house projects. On another note, we are very for the article going to electric gardening, and we have proposed even funding some of the gardeners partially with them transitioning. It's obviously easier to have that regulation in the historic district because the lawns are so small. This is not a big issue, but it is a major issue for hedge cutting, which is pervasive throughout the entire village. The only other comment I might add for Leslie's article is the rise of generators that are becoming more and more of an issue in the village. They are very loud. They need to be on once a week. And I don't know if you'd like to give any consideration. It's very hard, obviously, to monitor them, but there can be a suggestion of times that the generator should be recharging so that it doesn't interfere with someone. I will say my neighbor had one and she had it at 6 o'clock on a Saturday night. So we had a discussion about what would be a good time for this half an hour of generation. So that's just something I would bring up for you to consider as a committee. But we are very appreciative of the fact that this is a warrant article and totally support it. Thank you.
Lynn, thank you for sharing that. Jacques? It's your Jacques Mickey?
Hello, can you hear
Yes,
me?
we can hear you perfectly. Thank you, Jacques.
Okay, great. So under the air conditioning, prohibited noises, I have a suggestion of a word change towards the end of that subparagraph A there. And so, which I'd like to address. And also, I would like to speak to the 55 dBA over a 10-minute period of time, but that'd be sort of a secondary discussion. I'd like to propose that in 102 or 101-2, air conditioning, air handling equipment, under section A, prohibited noise, and then subsection A, no person shall operate, that should I read through the whole article and then go back and say what I want to strike out, or how would that best be
I
done?
think, so you're looking at, if you bear with me for a minute till I get to where you are in the article,
Yeah.
because then I will have to be, okay, so I'm on A. So 101-2, and
Yes.
then A, prohibited noises. Is that
Yes.
the one that you would like to suggest a wording amendment to?
Yes, I would.
It's short, so you can go ahead and read it, please, Jacques, so everyone knows what we're talking about if they don't have it open in front of them.
Sure. No person shall operate or cause to be operated any air conditioning or air handling equipment, swimming pool or spa pump, or an exhaust fan in such a manner as to exceed 55 dBA over a 10-minute period of time, measured from a distance of 40 feet or more from the source of the sound or the property line of the premises on which said activity is located at any time of the day or night. I would like to I can read through again with what I am proposing, or I can just say what I'm proposing.
You can just say what you're proposing.
Okay,
Please.
so from actually after the 10-minute period of time, I would propose measured from a distance of 40 feet from the source of the sound or the property line of the premises on which said activity is located, whichever is closest to the source of the sound at any time, day or night.
Okay. Leslie, sorry, Jacques, I just wanted to get Leslie's reaction to that
Okay.
amendment. Hi, Leslie. So what Jacques just suggested, he took out the or more after 40 feet on 1012A, baby A. And then he's from the source of the sound of the property line of the premises or whichever is closest. Is that how I got the phrasing?
Yes.
Okay. Leslie?
I think that's really a question for Charlie because that's, you know, the police are the ones that would be interpreting that, but it seems okay.
Charlie, please.
It doesn't have much of a effect on how we would react to a complaint. It's fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jacques, we're still on Article 70, so that's your suggestion to Article 70. I haven't gone back, we haven't gone to 71 yet, so we'll come back to that one.
Okay, Madam Chair, I still have would like to open a little discussion about the 55 dBA standard that was raised in this article.
Okay.
One of the problems is when people looked at the table of last year's or the existing law now, the daytime is 55 dBA and the night is 45 dBA. But there, for periodic noises or harmonic noises, it's actually by law, because of the character of the noise, which you would be subtract 5 from each of those. So it would be 50 max during the day and 40 max at night. And basically, air conditioning, air handling equipment, pumps, fans, compressors are harmonic noise or periodic noise. So 55 seems a little high, especially since that is considered in an urban environment. 50 dB is considered the standard for noise during the day, and 40 is at night. Both those standards are linked to a research metric called annoyance index, which means that if at night the noise is greater than 40 dB, more people are getting annoyed and call the police or they call the authorities or complain to people. And I'm not proposing that we put it down to 40, but I'm thinking that we go back to the original numbers, which would be 50 and 40, and maybe either do it 45 or 50 during it, because we were sort of putting these together as day and night. And it seems to me most people, seems a lot of complaints would be mostly the noise at night. You know, we're using a daytime standard for the noise at night currently at 55.
Thank you, Jacques. Okay. Gary Beller's up next. Peter, and then I'll come to you. Peter Hall, I'll come to you after Gary Beller. Gary, you're muted. Gary, you're muted. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and other committee members. I'm speaking to you today as Chair of the Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers, who by resolution at our last meeting have asked me to speak on this subject. Article 70, which proposes to make changes to the town's noise ordinances, is a major disappointment to our committee, especially our committee having been among the initiators of the request for the town to make changes to improve the quality of life to island residents during the busiest times of the summer season. The version in its current form makes some minor modifications to construction hours in July and August, but even these modest changes are limited to the old historic district in striking disregard of all of our constituents residing in Tom Nevers, Brant Point, the Cliff areas, Matticat, and all of the other communities that are heavily populated during the height of the season. Residents in those districts suffer the same distress from unreasonable noise as do overnight and other guests in the lodgings in the old historic areas. Moreover, the proposed elimination of the old standards under section 101.4 for daytime and nighttime noise eliminates those standards. Instead of updating the zoning designations in that section, along with other sections that apply more generalized noise prohibitions only during late hours, they leave unreasonable daytime noise out of the scope of the noise regulation almost completely, except with respect to HVAC equipment and pool pumps, which you've heard about. The bulk of our recommendations were not included at all in the proposed version, and accordingly, we are opposed to the passage of this article, and we recommend you give it a negative determination in its current form.
Thank
And
you,
by the
Gary.
way, some of the questions that were answered, when people talk about renters complaining, I'm talking about, when you look at the total number of taxpayers on the island, there's about 9,500 taxpayers, and there's about 2,000 of them dealing with rentals. That leaves a lot of us, 6,000 or 7,000. We're all there, and we're not all renting. We live there. Many of us, like myself, are there for months and months at a time, from May through October or even later till November, and sitting near and listening to construction going on night and day throughout 7 days of the week is very depressing for the people who love the island and look for some peace and comfort. And as we've mentioned, at least to the select board, many communities that have high tourism rates in the summer, like us, in their high seasons, they regulate that and they tone it down. And our modest request was to change those for maybe July and August. We wanted to have, say, no heavy construction on Sundays or holidays. None of that was accepted. So that's why we're very disappointed. And you heard heard one of our speakers before talk about how pleased they are. Sure, she's from the historic district in Sconset, and that's one of the 2 historic districts covered. The rest of the island are not covered at all, and I think I personally think that is quite disrespectful of all of the people that look to come to this wonderful island and spend their leisure time here during the summer months.
Thank you, Gary. Peter Holla, you had your hand up?
Thank you. I had the pleasure of serving on this committee that Leslie mentioned. And I have just a couple of points that I hope will be helpful to everybody in their consideration of this. First, I agree with the prior speaker. I'm sorry, I don't know his entire name. That the DBA, the 55 DBA is on the high side. And it should be lowered. I think Chief Gibson characterized 55 dBA as almost a screaming sound. But there are noise tables. You could all just Google and find out what 55 dBA and 45 dBA would mean to you if that constant sound were occurring in the house next door. And that leads me to another point, the historic district versus other districts on the island. I think the island is getting denser and denser. I've had the pleasure of being an owner for 15 years now, and there are probably twice as many houses on my street as there were 15 years ago. And when you look at the zoning classifications, I'm at a 20,000 square foot lot. The side yard setbacks, I think, are 10 feet. You go across the street into R1, which I believe is around 5,000 square feet. The side yard setbacks are 5 feet. Not a lot of difference. And my point is the same thing pertains to these historic districts where they're very dense and therefore if it's a good, if noise limits are a good idea for the historic districts, it seems to me they're also a good idea where people live in slightly less, but almost as dense. Lastly, the decibel noise levels. In section 101-4 of the existing noise bylaw, it sets forth noise limits for various districts on the island. And I think one of the problems is that those districts are no longer representative of what the actual zoning regulations contain right now. And so one of the solutions, instead of just chopping out 101-4 entirely, would be to update them to make them apply to the appropriate districts. Those 101.4 also covers daytime and nighttime noise limits. And this brings me to my last point, is the current Article 70 proposal really has virtually no daytime noise limits in it. By eliminating 101-4, what is left is in 101-1 of the new Article 70 is prohibitions that start basically at night and end in the wee hours of the morning, with the exception of the air conditioning, HVAC regulation. It seems to me we're losing a lot. There are no standards for daytime noise regulation, and loud and unnecessary noise is annoying during the daytime, although it may be more reasonable in the daytime than at night, but it's still a problem. One of your members brought up the issue of enforcement. Enforcement is really, I think, a big problem. And as I understand it, there is one person on the island and one noise meter on the island that can do the enforcement. And so maybe an answer would be to take some of the summer police interns, for want of a better term, and train them so that they might be more adept at this noise regulation. What Article 70 does is basically replace the decibel limits, which are, I think, fairly well understood. You can find them on the internet any place, with a different standard, which is a loud noise either 100 feet or 50 feet from the source. But those limits only apply by and large from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning. You're missing out a lot in terms of getting rid of the daytime and nighttime regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. A question for you. You said you were on this committee, and yet you've just gone through a laundry list of things that you would have preferred to see. So you actually didn't agree with the bylaw as it was put together?
Well, the bylaws that you have before you are largely rewritten. And yeah, there's some improvements in what, and as I think Leslie noted before, as a member of the ACNVT, I had written when I saw the process one in which we basically saw the written versions, and Leslie can correct me if I'm wrong, somewhat after our last meeting. And I had suggested, for example, expanding from the historic district to 20,000 square foot districts. I'd also written about this 101-4 issue. So you can say that I am very much in favor of improving the bylaw, but that I was very clear in where I thought the improvements were shortcomings.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to, okay, Lynn, one more quick comment, and then I'm going to close the public hearing on this topic.
Thank you. I don't want to leave you with the impression that I wouldn't be for having all of Sconset come under this 8 to 5 during the summer. I think this is a good start to see how it goes how construction and landscapers adapt to it before it's rolled out to other districts. I myself do not live in the old historic district of Sconset. I live slightly out of that district. So please know that in the future, we would be very positive about making this a bigger process for the island and including all neighborhoods. But at this point, we feel like this is a start and we are very positive about that start. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thanks for the clarification. Okay, I'm closing the public comment for this at this point, and I am looking to Finance Committee to see if you have further comments, questions, or if we are at a point where we're ready to make a motion. Chris Glowacki?
Yeah, I have a comment. I just want to make sure I reinforce the notion that has come up already. I do think that sort of eliminating a whole class of commonly used equipment in one sentence in a 4-page noise bylaw is not what would be expected. I think if we're going to take on that topic, particularly since we had a great deal of debate over one narrow slice of that a year ago, I think if we're going to take on that topic, it should come back as its own article. I appreciate the fact that there was trade representation in the group, and I think that's great, but we all know the trades are not homogenous. There are small players, big players, players that rely on different things, players that concentrate in town, players that concentrate more out of town. So I'm really uncomfortable with that. I also will repeat that I think 5 o'clock is, even in a small segment, is a very early end of the workday in Nantucket. I don't think we need to treat the whole island like it's a gated community, but I'm less concerned about, an hour or two there than I am about the first point.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else? George?
I agree with Chris.
Thank you. Thank you, George. Jill?
I agree. I think it's a little strange. We'd be contradicting ourselves with our own motion for another article from last year. So that definitely is not something I want to support, that particular line. Thanks.
Thank you, Jill. I mean, yes, we just as because I had to, of course, write out why we didn't approve things we did or didn't make positive motions. And part of our challenge last year was, number one, the equipment issue that you raised, that the bigger properties couldn't use electric batteries as effectively. And secondly, it was because of the urgency in which it was going in. It didn't allow the smaller landscapers any time to plan for capital expenses, over a period of 2 to 3 years, or had any buyback programs, anything like that. So that was part of our, last year, that was part of our rationale as to why we ended up with motion to adopt.
That's right.
And Lynn, can you please mute? Lynn, thank you. So, okay. And anyone else have any other comments? All right, so do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to not adopt in its current state.
I second.
Okay, is there further discussion on that?
Yeah, I'd like to see members propose some amendments to the article so that we can get to a positive recommendation here. I think there's a lot of good here, and if there's objections to certain parts of it, then I think we should try to build some consensus around what changes we want to see, and see if we can get this to a place where we can all agree to give it a positive recommendation to go forward.
I agree.
George?
I think we should we should reject the article at this time in this form. And unfortunately, I don't think we can keep it as simply stated as it is. I think that it's going to take a lot of turns and twists in order to cover the various issues such as Chris has brought up, such as Stephen has brought up, etc. And while I know there's a lot that can be done, a lot of improvement that can be done with what's current now, I don't think implementing this now is going to be to our best interest. Thank you.
I think we have a motion on the table, don't we?
We do, and we have a second, but we have further discussion on the motion, Peter, before we take a vote.
Okay.
Joanna?
I agree with George. I think there's too much stuff packed into the article. And I think, I mean, I agree with some of it, right? I agree, right? It would be nice for us to get to consensus, but I think it's too complicated. I think the noise issues are one, I think the leaf blowers are another. And I think that, and I support, you know, all of those things. I just think that specifically with the way it is, it's not enough.
Chris Glowacki?
I mean, I would have a concern that if we just do a negative recommendation, don't offer an amendment to try to get this over the goal line, that it would perhaps get adopted in its entirety, which I think would be a real shame.
Okay.
I'm going to agree with Stephen. I think that, and Lynn, whose last name I'm not going to butcher a second time, which is, it's an improvement. And the fact that they'll be stopping working at 5 o'clock compared to, and not starting till 8 in the morning. I lived next to a construction site for 2 years, and they started at 6 in the morning and carried on till 9 at night for 2 years. So this is a start. And I think we can easily come back with a more stringent article next year. The town, you know, the select board could come back with a more stringent article next year, incorporating many of the concerns that Gary Beller raised, that Jacques raised. And, you know, everything isn't perfect right out of the gate. And I think if we strike the line that says about leaf blowers, so then that way we don't contradict our last year's motion not to adopt on leaf blowers, because that is, I would too like to see the community who thrives on leaf blowers be happy with this, and I don't have that information today. So if we could make that amendment in our motion, then that would be my strong preference. However, you know, I am one voice on this committee, so that's where I landed on all of this discussion. Jill?
Can we also add in Jock's change? I don't know if we want to do the decibel change, but in, he has it like from the source. Can we?
Oh, yeah, the
putting that
42.
in as well, because that helps him with his article, and maybe that would satisfy him. I'm not sure, Jock, I can't speak for you, but.
Yes, I think the wording change, as Charlie indicated, that wouldn't wouldn't cause a negative effect or a negative impact to the police department's enforcement. And so therefore Jacques' wording change could be incorporated as the part of our motion. Thank you, Jill. So here's what I think is on the table. Motion to adopt, provided leaf blowers are struck off and we make Jacques' wording change, which is, I don't have written down exactly in front of me. I usually leave that to Libby Gibson to capture these great things and be able to come back.
So that's offered as an alternative to the current motion that we have to vote, right? Which is to not adopt.
Right. So I'm just saying that would be, first we will vote the first motion that's out there, of course. Thank you, Chris.
Mhm.
And then I'm just saying what would come after that if we didn't, if we approve the first motion, then we're done. Okay, we're done with the topic. If we don't approve the first motion, then I was just suggesting what I would see as the possible second motion. Sorry, I probably shouldn't tell the end of the movie before the movie starts. So any further discussion on the motion that's on the table, which is motion not to adopt? Otherwise, I'll go to a roll call vote. No, thank you. Okay, start with Jill. Motion not to adopt.
No.
So, okay, Joe?
Aye.
Okay, I gotta keep track.
Sorry. I thought we're making a motion. You made a motion about yours, Denise. I'm confused.
No,
Don't ask me first.
we have the first motion on
We
the
have-
table, which is motion not to adopt. We had a further discussion on it. I previewed what the subsequent motion might be if we came in as a negative vote on the first motion. So
I don't support George's motion.
it was Schaefer's motion and Jill and Joanna's second. So see, this isn't as
I
easy.
thought George made the motion. Oh, see that. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. See, this isn't as easy as it seems on Zoom, everyone. All right, so Jill, no.
We don't envy you.
So the motion not to adopt, you vote no. Okay, thank you. And Joe, you voted aye. Is that correct?
Aye.
Thank
Yep.
you. Stephen?
No.
Okay. Chris?
No.
Okay. George?
Yeah.
Peter Schaefer?
Aye.
Thank you. Joanna,
Aye.
Peter McCashin,
Aye.
for 4-4. I vote no. I think you saw that coming.
I'm not sure this has ever happened.
Ever. We've always been really very aligned. Okay. So I propose, or
Denise?
yes, Libby, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I tried to keep up with your votes,
Okay.
and I believe there are 9 of you voting, right?
Yep, 5-4.
Yeah,
No,
5 to
aye.
4, not to adopt.
Not to, no, 5-4. So motion not to adopt, you say
Right.
aye if you mean motion not to adopt. Correct?
Correct.
And there was 4 people that did that.
I jotted down 5.
No, Denise, there were 5.
Okay.
You had Joe Grouse, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, Joe Grouse, George Harrington, Peter Schaefer, Joanna Roach, and Peter McEachern voted not to adopt.
George, you voted not to adopt?
I voted yes to adopt.
Okay, you
You voted to adopt a not to adopt motion.
Correct. I voted positively on the motion.
Okay, you're in favor of not to adopt. Let's just, is that how it, okay, I interpreted it the other way, in which case it passes 5-4, motion not to adopt.
So if that stays, then the bylaw remains as is.
Correct.
Correct.
And potentially passes on town meeting floor with all the things that are in it as it stands. Thank you. Okay. Jill?
Well, there's still the opportunity for people to make amendments on town meeting floor too.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No question. Thank you, Joe, for the clarification. Jill?
Through the chair, can I just ask George a question?
Yes, of course.
George, I was under the impression that you thought that this article was too fast, too soon.
I think one of us has an inverted sense of what we were trying to do.
You did, so
One doing that, I apologize, but it's already done.
Well, I mean, nothing's set in stone here. If you didn't intend to vote the way you did, we can't undo that. Did you want to throw the whole article out?
I think that we'd rather move on to the next thing, and I'm fine with the result we've had.
Okay. Okay. Article 71. Jacques?
Thanks for all your hard work, everybody on that committee.
Thank you, Leslie. It's a good start, and I guess it'll be a good start. Well, with town meeting floor, everything is. Jacques, now that the article will go forward as exactly as it's written, what is that? What is the impact does that have on your article? And please explain where you stand on your article and your expectations of the Finance Committee.
Yes. Well, actually, I will make an amendment on the floor to change the wording in the proposed Article 70 when it comes up on the floor. But if you had approved this, I think I probably would have said, let's drop or withdraw Article 71, but I'd rather have my amendment done to the existing law at this point than have no new law.
Okay.
And so what my little wording thing does is just basically within the old law, it just includes air conditioners, air handlers, etc. Saying
Jacques, I'm sorry, but it's a bark fest here. I can't hear myself think. I actually have to step out for 2 minutes. Stevie,
Okay.
turning it over to you so I can let my dogs out.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Jack.
So I think would like to let Article 71 stand as it is currently. And I will withdraw it if Article 70 gets passed with, Article 70, if it gets passed at town meeting, will make my Article 71 obsolete. And so, but if Article 70 doesn't pass at town meeting, then I'd like to still amend the existing law. So I will let my Article 71 stand. And Article 71 really basically just says that it proposes that the air handlers be regulated, the noise from them. And it would fall in the district, for instance, I'm in, it'd be 55 during the day and 45 dB at night, measured from probably the property line.
Thank you, Jacques. Is there questions for Jacques from the Finance Committee? Joe?
Denise, I think I should recuse myself from this article. I'm a board member of the residences at Sherburne Commons, and Mr. Zemicki is in a butter. And I believe that this article is sort of specifically targeted at Sherburne Commons. So I got to recuse myself from this discussion.
Thank you, Joe. Any other Finance Committee? Charlie, I'm sorry, Chris, I'll get to you in a second. Charlie, is this going to be an enforcement challenge to have two different standards on the noise?
Absolutely. We have to be careful of the laws of unintended consequences by making little tweaks on any of these things, because one small change could render the whole thing not enforceable. Particularly with lowering the decibels to 45. I took a look at the Sherburne Commons issue this summer, and the background noise just from wind in the pine trees surrounding that area was over 45 decibels on the day that I was out there. So that's one thing about Nantucket. It's not as quiet as you'd think it would be, with the sound of the ocean roaring and the wind in the trees and things. It's difficult to get a clean sound reading in some of these places. And that's, when they have a standard of taking a sound reading averaging over a 10-minute time period, it's very difficult to get a reading on some things. So that's I wouldn't think that we would have a great deal of problems enforcing a 45 decibel limit anywhere on Nantucket, because the background noise is often at that level.
Thank you, Charlie. Does anyone, Chris, you had your hand up? I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is really for anyone, maybe other board members. I'm struggling this year with the distance between our first public hearings and when we're deliberating on this stuff. It was a long time ago when we talked about this last. And was the notion that this would cause a bunch of existing equipment need to be replaced before its lifespan. Its normal lifespan was up, so people would, if they're in violation of this, you'd have kind of a wholesale trade out to new equipment.
I think Charlie had the answer to that earlier, which is all equipment today, even old equipment, is not, you don't have to replace.
So it is grandfathered in if it's existing.
There is no need to grandfather. If the air conditioning units or fans are working properly, they're quiet. If there's a problem with the mechanical functioning of the unit, then that's where you get the rumbling and the rattling and the high pitched sounds. That's a maintenance issue that could happen on a newer unit or on an older unit. But basically any air conditioning compressor out in the field today is fairly new, just because of the changes in the refrigerant that they've had. Anything that's over than 15 years old, I think is an anomaly right now. And the careful part about the 45 decibel limit is that the machines may come over that just with the fan noise coming off of these units, and depending on where they're measured from. So it's not an exact science. So if you're measuring something 10 feet from a property line like you would in Wisconsin versus 50, 60 feet in town or in a more of a rural environment, you get a completely different result. So it's a challenge. So I just be cautious about making these little tweaks and decibels because it could be a real problem.
Thank you.
Charlie, any other questions from the Finance Committee? With that, do I have a motion?
Yeah, I move to adopt the article, but I guess I'll wait for a second and then discuss.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. It's open for discussion.
Okay, so my comment would be, or my request would be that if my motion passes, we include a comment in the warrant, something along the lines of what Jacques described, that if Article 70 were to pass, Article 71 would be withdrawn. This is, meant to be a part of a larger, or could be a part of a larger change to how we view noise around the island. I think it's going to look a little funny to people who don't go back and watch this meeting or weren't here to listen to us. And they say they threw out all these changes over here, but they, for some reason, feel strongly about air compressors and air handlers. So I think some comment explaining, maybe a comment needs to be on 70 also that says there was discussion and there were parts of the article that were objectionable, and we hope that some form of this passes in the future. And then Article 71, we can have maybe without a comment if we would include that one.
Chris?
I guess that's why I'm going to be a no vote on your, Chair, that's why I'm going to be a no vote on Stephen's motion, is for that confusion. I say, take it all back, fix it, and bring it back as one in the following year.
What is broken about this one?
What's broken about this one is, I think come back as not a standalone, as part of a greater whole. And also I am concerned on the specifics of this one for the issues outlined by Mr. Gibson.
Other comments?
Madam
Gary,
Chairman,
no, Gary Beller, you can't. We're not on open. You can't make comments when we're not open for public comment. So this is the deliberations of the Finance Committee. So I can't accept, I'm sorry, I can't accept any comments from the
It's
audience.
a public hearing.
No, it's only when it's open for public comment, and it's not, while we're in deliberations on articles, it's not open for public comment. So you can't make a comment at this point, please. Thank you. Jill?
The reason I support Stephen's motion, though, is because now that we have a motion not to adopt on the previous article about noise, and I think that will fail because at town meeting, because of this gas-powered leaf blower situation, I feel like people's heads are going to explode. So I feel like, Jacques has a very limited article, and I support it for that reason, because we can move forward and do something now.
Thank you, Jill. Joanna?
I don't think it's consistent for us to say it's okay to have leaf blowers that don't have a noise requirement, and it's not okay for these other things, right? So I'm tending to agree with Chris that in order that both of these are just not exact. I support the concepts behind them, but the way that they're presented doesn't exactly make the most sense to vote positively to adopt both of them. So I'd rather step back and have something be retooled between the two of them that are inclusive and not address them in bits. And I think it's going to be very confusing at the town meeting for people to understand.
It will be confusing if we frame this somehow as either you love leaf blowers or you love loud air compressors, because that is not at all what we're talking about.
I understand that.
Jill, you raised your hand.
I guess I just don't feel like Jacques' article is really at odds. I'm not positive that committee that met was even working on air conditioners until Jacques really had his concerns and he had been talking to them. So I feel like it's just not right to him for him to get punished because of the larger article. And that's what I mean.
Thank you, Jill. Anyone else on Finance Committee have a comment? Okay, so the motion on the table is motion to adopt with comment. And the comment is, if Article 70 passes a town meeting floor, we would expect this article to be withdrawn, or this article could potentially be withdrawn. If Article 70 doesn't pass on town meeting floor, then this article goes forward as at least a start on noise regulation. Is what I'm trying to remember to summarize from what was said before. Is that accurate, Stephen? Wordy but accurate?
Yeah, I think I talked myself into the idea that maybe a comment on 70 would be more appropriate than this one, but
Okay, that's where at the end of your conversation, that is actually where you landed.
Yeah.
So I'm just going back to therefore. So this would be then just plain motion to adopt is what's on the table, and it's been seconded. And then if we do that, if that passes favorably, you would, well, in any case, we'd put we could put a comment on 70. It has nothing to do with this vote, frankly.
right, and maybe
Right.
my suggestion is that we just come back to 70 and 71, whatever the vote is here, and discuss whether we ought to add a comment to one or both of the articles.
Okay, we'll put the comments off for a future meeting, and then we will just take the vote now on motion to adopt. And I'll start with you, Stephen.
Aye.
Chris? Chris, I couldn't hear you.
Because I was on mute. Nay.
Oh. Okay. Peter Schaefer.
Nay.
Wait a minute, hold on a second. I didn't do a good job keeping track last time, so let's see if I do better this time. Okay, Jill?
Aye.
Thank you. Joanna?
Nay.
Okay. Peter McEachern?
No.
Denise, aye, but that's it of our voting. So, oh, George, I'm sorry, George.
Nay.
Okay. So so effectively, we had a motion to adopt and we voted no. Oh, what happens then? Is that by definition, motion not to adopt? I've never had this happen.
You need a new motion.
Yeah, you need a new motion.
In all my years on FinCom, this has never happened.
Or you can delay making the motion, but you either need a new motion or can delay making the motion for
Okay.
further discussion.
Okay. Joanna, I was going to,
What if we made a motion to take no action?
is there a second to that?
I would second that.
Or just seconding that? Now opening up the discussion on take no action. Is there any
I think that this is where we could have a comment that brings together both of the articles and addresses the issues that we have. Because we're not building consensus here, really. I mean, we have a group of us who thinks that the article is not well defined or needs some specific tweaking, and then the other half of us who wants to make progress, which I also support. So I'm kind of in the middle, right? So maybe if we take no action and we say that these articles as a combination don't necessarily meet the goals or the intention behind them, and is there a way to modify that?
Here's what I'd like to do, actually, and I'm going to suggest we follow Terry's excellent advice and put off making any further motions on this until a future meeting. And my reasoning for this is, we still have a couple more I think we can get done today. We're already at 6:02. We had a long one yesterday. And it's just, these are long meetings, and unless I see a lot of people violently opposed to my suggestion on this, or is there an appetite to just get this one done in the books? Chris, you're raising your hand?
I mean, I actually like your idea of delaying this, but we do have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. So I just don't know, can we just put off the vote? Is that
Yeah, we have to. go
procedurally
through.
okay?
I guess that's what we have to do. Thank you, Chris. Okay, so there is a motion. Any further discussion on the motion? No? Okay, I'm going to roll call. Let me see if I can do this for a third time. Get the count right. Jill, on take no action.
No.
Thank you. Stephen.
No.
Okay. Peter Schaefer.
No.
Okay, Chris Glowacki.
No.
Okay. Joanna.
I don't know. What if I just withdrew the motion?
That's basically what we're doing. Is tabling it.
Yeah, I mean, that procedurally, I mean, that's okay. I'm okay to withdraw the motion.
Yeah, you can withdraw the motion.
Okay, I withdraw the motion.
Okay, the motion's been withdrawn.
You didn't want that defeat on your permanent record, Joe.
Yeah, she didn't want her search rankings to go down. So, yeah. Okay, all right, folks. Here's what we have left for tonight. And we have the Council for Human Services, which is quite straightforward. I think Livy can take us through it in a couple of minutes, and then we should be able to get through that one. I would actually push off 73, 82, and 96 to a future meeting because frankly, I think we may end up rushing them rather than giving them the attention they should potentially have. And I would rather us take our time on those. Even though we've discussed them before, I still would like to, I would prefer to have not a let's get it done in a hurry topic. And as we have another meeting this week and several more meetings this month, I think that would be okay. Can I see a thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of what I just suggested? I see many thumbs up. Okay, so then Libby will do 72 and then we will call it a day for today.
Okay, very quickly, and Rachel can supplement this if needed. The bylaw that establishes the membership for the Council for Human Services was amended 2 years ago to reduce the number of people on there because they weren't managing to get a quorum. Now that they are seeming to get a quorum, they want to go back to 9. So we have put this article in for them. Is that correct, Rachel? Do you want to add anything?
No, they just had more applicants as well than available slots on the committee. And so that was part of their argument as to they could utilize more membership and create more diversity on their group. And they asked to go back to 9.
Excellent. Thank you for that great summary. Okay, any questions from Finance Committee? Not a
Motion
hand.
to adopt.
Second.
Second.
Joe is coming in quick. Second, okay, I will start I don't think I have to take a count on this one. Peter Schaefer,
Aye.
Chris Glowacki,
Aye.
Jill Veith,
Aye.
Stephen Morey,
Aye.
Peter McEachern,
Aye.
George Harrington, Joanna Roche,
Aye.
Denise Crono, aye. That passes unanimously.
Aye,
Thank you.
aye. You
Oh,
missed me, Denise.
I did? You said aye right off the bat. Oh, okay, sorry. Joe Grouse.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your hard work and your attention as always. And we will see each other on Thursday. Our next meeting is Thursday at 4 o'clock, and it's appropriation meeting. So it'll be, Brian and Libby will be leading us through those discussions. So, and it's on our agenda already. So I think we're all set. Terry, thank you as always for the clarity and the help. We appreciate it. Same, Greg. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, yeah, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Peter Schaefer,
Aye.
Stephen Morey,
Aye.
Joe Grouse,
Good night.
Peter McEachern,
Aye.
Chris Glowacki.
Aye.
I always leave them open. Thank you. Jill Veith,
Aye.
thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Aye.